Hey everyone, welcome back to She Birds Podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Michelle, and today's guest is Candace. Hi,
Hi.
Candace.
Hi there. How are you?
Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Woo.
So, so to start out, can you tell us what inspired you to write the book back in the Year series?
Absolutely. Well, it's a true story. It's a memoir. It's a travel memoir, and it's about a girl, me, who travels around the world and backpacks around the world, and all of the crazy things that happen. So that's kind of what the books are about in a nutshell. What inspired me to write them was kind of like a more of a career transition point, if you will. I have worked in the corporate world for about 20 years, and I've always felt this, I don't know, it's like scratch or this desire to write books. Now, I'm sure a lot of folks have it, and someone told me one time that if you have a book in you, it's your obligation to write it down, which is always cool, and that always stuck with me. And I was in a position where I said, okay, I'm gonna leave my job and try this and go and try to write this. This story has been something that has been sitting inside for a long time that I've wanted to tell. I needed some distance though because it was kind of a difficult period in my life, and I think I need
Mhm.
some distance and some perspective to be able to do the story justice and to be able to tell it in such a way that it was an enjoyable novel, enjoyable book, rather than just a bunch of sort of stuff. So yeah, so it was more the that had been sort of lingering, growing inside, and really wanting to be told. And yeah, and then I got the opportunity and took it.
Nice, amazing. So you traveled all around the world? Like, is this a true
Mhm.
story? Like you did?
Yeah, this is a true story. I started in my journey in London, and I worked in London for a bit, and then I traveled around the UK and Ireland, and then just went. I bought an around the world airline ticket and just picked locations, strategic locations to jump across, but the rest was all overland in buses, taxis, ferries, trains, random people who give you lifts, and yeah, and just made my way around the world.
Oh, wow. In my 37 years of living, I have never been on a train. I've never been on a train.
You've never been on a train?
No, yeah, I've never been
Oh,
on a train.
that
That's
is crazy. It's not a common mode of transport in North America. Is it like, if you take a train, it's more of an event, right?
Mhm.
But there in Europe and other places, it's just a common to sort of hop on the train, go to one place, go to another. That's crazy. That's great. That's really cool. That's
So,
really cool.
so how did you come up with the title for the series?
The title for a series was is Back in a Year, and that to me really symbolizes what this journey was for me. Because when I was at the airport and I was leaving my dad and my brother, and I said, "Oh, I'll be back in a year," and we all kind of know, yeah, you're not going to be back in a year, and it was kind of the comforting words that I told myself to be able to go and do this, because inside I knew I wasn't coming back anytime soon, but
Mhm.
there was this real grounding to say, okay, I'll be back in a year. Like, it's not a year, it's fine. Like, just it'll be good, And I don't think I came back for. It was. I did come back for in a year, but I only came back to visit. I didn't come back to Canada. I think it was about 10 years before I came back home.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man. So what do you hope readers take away from this five-part journey?
What I really, it's not unique. Like what I did, a lot of people have done. So I'm not saying, oh, I'm all that for doing it. It's not what I'm trying to say. What inspired me to do this trip was was just more grief. My mom had cancer. She got cancer when I was 14 and she died when I was 22. So I spent all of that time looking after my mom. Like I didn't do much. I was very good at, taking care of someone, getting the groceries and taking my brother to back to school shopping. But I didn't really know what I wanted, what I liked, because I kind of had been put into a lane and had to live in that lane. And then after my mom died, I had this emptiness, and it was just really hard because it was a lot of time in my day I spent looking after her, and I didn't really know what to do at that time. And it made me really sad because I had all this time and I didn't realize I had all this time that I wasn't filling. So I was filling it with, I don't know, I was baking and, trying to fill it with random things that just wasn't working. So I needed to figure some things out, and I needed to deal with the grief that I thought I had dealt with, but I didn't. So the first journey is really it's called Finding Color. And it was because I lived in this really monochrome world, and everything was just slow, and everything was really, really heavy, and this first book was really about digging out and finding myself in a place where there is color. It's not all gone. You can find that. And there's a lot of funny things that happen along the way. I live with this crazy Spanish couple that have sex in the bathtub, and they pull the bathtub away and it leaks into my room. And I have this temp job in London, and I go to Russia, and there's just this real sort of, it's funny, it's sad, it's about a discovery. It's the full adventure. And I when I started to write, I thought, okay, one book is going to be done. And when I started to put in the words, the adequate amount of words that I needed, because my goal was for people to be able to take this trip. I wanted you to open the book and sit there and laugh and take the trip and cringe and just go, oh, and just go through all the experiences that I had. In order to do that, I needed more space, which is why I kind of blew out into this 5-part series, and it's divided by geography. So.
Oh. Nice. So is it on audio book yet?
It's not on audiobook yet. You sound like my husband, because he says, he's read the first one and he's halfway through the second one, and he said, it'd be so much easier if it was an audiobook. But no, it's not an audiobook. And my husband says, oh, you should do it. And I said, I cannot read this book because there's so many different accents in there, because there's a lot of Australian, New Zealand, Scottish, English. There's all sorts of different accents, and I am the worst at accents, like the absolute worst. I said, I'm going to butcher this thing. There is absolutely no way I can be the one reading it. So I need to, when I get into it, I need to have someone who's really good at all the accents. So.
That's funny. So how long did it take for you to write all 5 books?
So all 5 books I have, because like I said, I started as one book, and then it just sort of grew, and then I started to chop it. So I wrote it all, let's say the first book, by the time my strategy, it was a real, I have this stubborn streak. It's just really, it kind of gets in there. And I thought, I can do this. I'm a very independent girl, and I thought, I can do this. I'm going to get this done. So I started to write it, and it probably took me about a year to kind of get all the books kind of in a compartment. I'm going to call it a compartment, because they weren't quite a book, but they were in a compartment. And with all the stories that I wanted to sort of lift from my journals and pictures, and to be able to put it together and say, okay, this is journey 1 to 5. And then I started to look for help, because I thought, okay, I've gone as far as I can go. I need some expert opinions. And I met I interviewed loads of people. And it's funny, when you're trying to find that partner to work with, I would definitely recommend folks to take the time to really interview and look for that person who understands your vision. I knew what I wanted. I knew what structure I wanted. I knew the type of story I wanted to tell. I just didn't know if I was telling a good one, right? So that's the space I needed. And that's what I was looking for. And everyone I went to said, oh, this is how we should change it. And it should look like that. And I went, okay, no, you're not for me. You weren't listening to anything I said. I want you to help me write better. Like, that's what I need help on. Right. So I found the person, which is great. Introduction from someone else. Her name's Susie Fedori, because she's amazing. And she said she reviewed book one. And to be fair, she was so kind, but she was also very thorough. Let's say thorough. That's a good word. And she went through my whole book one, and I didn't start to get feedback on the story. I got feedback on how to write. So then what I did was I rewrote book one, applied that to book two, rewrote book two, and I sent her book two. And she said, oh, okay, great. So I still had quite a lot to work on. And then I took the learnings from book one, the learnings from book two, and threw them into book three, rewrote book three, and sent it to her. And she goes, okay, there's just a few things, but I can start to give you feedback on the story. So I took all the feedback, went back to book one, rewrote book one, sent it to her again. And then at that point, I got solely feedback on the story and the content in terms of how to improve the story. So those first three passes was all about learning how to write and learning the art and gaining the competency, and then coming back. So that took a couple of years. I'm not going to lie. It was a long journey. And let me tell you, my hardest thing to deal with was my family. Now, they're very supportive and they're really great, but it's really hard to be like Jack Nicholson and be typing away and not produce anything. And my husband would come in and he'd read over my shoulder. I'm like, don't look, like it's not done. And I really, that's how long it took me, and to give myself the grace to be able to learn how to do it. I appreciate not everyone can have that kind of time they can apply to learning something. It felt like going through university again. I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't. And now I'm at the point where I'm very comfortable with the art of telling a story, and the words kind of, they flow better, and the ability to kind of craft a scene and all of that. But it took time, years.
Oh man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, years. Mm-hmm.
So which book in the series was the most challenging to write, and why?
So far I've written 1 and 2 were published, and I'm working on 3. 2 I always knew was going to be the hard one for me. I'm looking forward to 4. 4 is going to be so fun. I can't wait to write it. 4 is going to be just a joy. 5 might be a little tricky just because you need to sort of wind up a series, right? But still tell a story. Mm-hmm. So 5 is going to apply some new learnings for myself. And also, interestingly enough, in terms of writing a series, there's an art to that as well, which I didn't know, right? Because when I wrote book 1, you're introducing, you can just blah, blah, blah. And with book 2, you don't previously on this series, like you don't have that, right? You have to weave in just enough, because my goal was that if someone just picked up book 2, they could read it. Like, you might be like, oh, dang, I wish I knew what happened, in the other one. But I give you the information enough so and you can just pick up that part and read it. So that was my goal, was to be able to say they are one continuous story, but should you just pick up one book and say, I only want to read about this part of the world, you can. Because when I write the beginning, there's like the first chapter of book 3, for example. I think it took me weeks to write, and it's only 12 pages, just because I had to incorporate 2 books worth of information and in a scene where something major was happening. So I'm like, and it was just dropping in, like, okay, this character's from here and this character's from here. So just trying to do that without overwhelming the reader. So it took a long time to craft that. Anyways, so book 2, out of all of them, I would say was the hardest to write. And the reason why was because the main story arc of book 2 is dealing with grief. So it happens. It's funny. It's hilarious. There's a lot of crazy, like, book 2 goes from the border of Russia and Estonia to Prague. So you go all through like the Baltics, and you go through Poland, and it's driving down the coast of Croatia and Austria. Like it's like busy. Like there's a lot of places to go, and I knew that it covers a lot of geography. So there's a lot of like I have to keep dumping you into a scene. I need to dump you into what it's like to be, I don't know, in Dubrovnik in Croatia, and what it's like to be on the ferry, or what it's like to be on the train. So I'm constantly dumping you into scenes. So I needed to be economical with my words, but poignant to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So that was tough. But also the arc of the book is about dealing with grief, and there's so many layers to that, baby, and just to be able to EQ through it, and to sort of say, okay. And it crossed over the anniversary of my mom's death, and then the emotions and the reactions. So I kind of had to relive those to be able to write them properly. And so I really hope I did it justice. I really wanted to be able to say, okay, I'm not like, I've opened that box, and this is what I found in there, and then this is how I dealt with it over the time. So it was kind of an interesting and wrapped up in a funny, and I didn't want it to be all so sad. So it's wrapped up in a funny package, So it took a while to kind of tease out that one.
Nice. So where was you in book one? Like what country was you at in book one, or
book one starts in London. So I work in London for a bit, and then I travel around UK and then Ireland, and then I start in Russia. So I go to Russia, which is the start of the Around the World ticket. So the first leg on the Around the World ticket was from Russia to St. Petersburg. So so we started in St. Petersburg, and then Moscow, and then it ends on the train going to Estonia, and that's where the second book picks it up, in this border crossing from Russia to Estonia, which was a whole thing in itself. But it was that flavor of, I had always wanted to go to Russia. I know there's lots of things going on, but it was always a place that fascinated me just because of the history, and just the different, like even just the different buildings and the different. So yes, and you get the whole thing. Like you get the guns at the Kremlin, and the So anyway, so it's all in there. Yeah. So that's the first book.
Ooh. I want to read this book.
You should.
So were there any parts of the series that surprised you as they developed?
I think, let me think. I think so. I thought I had dealt with a lot of the emotions. I think it's more the emotional piece, because one of the things when I first was starting to write was I thought, oh, okay, I've got this. I started to write all the things that happened. And I gave it to a girlfriend of mine who we both love really bad romance novels. So it's like my guilty pleasure. So she was my bad romance partner. And I sent it to her, and she avoided my calls. She didn't answer. I'm like, what is going on? And when she gave me the feedback, she said, yes, I couldn't get into it. It was like reading an itinerary. And I went, okay, that's really good feedback. Thank you. So, and this was in early days. And I thought, you know what? That was the nicest thing someone could say to me, because it was a really succinct way to wrap up what I was missing, right? I wasn't adding enough emotion. I wasn't adding enough story, like inks, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, and that's where it got difficult, right? I had to really go back and open up all those feelings and put them on the page, and just be like, and that's when I really got it. I thought, oh my God, I have to put all this shit down on paper, and it's really painful. And that's where, for me, the time in terms of it was, it was 20 years since, or not quite 20, 25 years since this story had took place. So I was able to kind of step back and say, okay, and treat myself, if you will, like a character, and to be able to add that emotion. But it was real emotion. And also, I think the hard part too was I was such an idiot in book one. Like I did some really, really stupid stuff. And I sat there for a long time, and there's one part like really early on, and when you read it, you'll be like, whoa. And I was horrible, and I thought, okay, do I not put this in? And I thought, you know what, it's not like you have to put it in. Like, and I've had so many people say, oh, I didn't like her. She's so naive and she was really horrible. And I'm like, yeah, I was. Like, it was horrible. And but what I love is that there's so much space to grow, and there's so much room in the 5 books to move along in terms of maturity. And I was very mature in terms of looking after someone and helping them, but in terms of some of the things in life, I was not. So I tried to put that vulnerability on the page. And I think that was hard. That was one of the harder parts. Mm-hmm. I know.
So, do you have any specific writing routines or process you follow while working on this series?
Yeah, it's very easy. When you have a work day and you're going to work, you have a schedule, a meeting with this person, a meeting with that person, you have an itinerary. And when I left the corporate world, I found that difficult. I had to reapply those goal-based deliveries to my work here. So I have goals. I have page goals each day. I have things I need to get through, points I need to do. I have review, like I write. I said, okay, I write 6 pages today, 7 pages tomorrow, whatever it is. And I set myself like quite stringent goals. I find that in terms of I can really focus for 5-6 hours, and then after that it just kind of gets a bit like my return on my time isn't as great. So what I try to do is really quite focus and deliver in that sort of sweet spot of like focus time. So yes, I do.
Oh wow! So some authors that I've talked to, they like watching TV while they're writing. I'm like, I don't know, like that would be distracting. Like you'll get like some of the characters from there into your story. Like I don't see
No, I have this really, it's a funny one. I have this cat, and if he gets ignored, he doesn't really like it. So he jumps up onto my desk and he walks across my my keypad. So one time he did that, and all of a sudden my book started reading itself to me, and I went, what did he press? And I know that was a feature in Word. So you can do this read aloud, and it's just called read aloud in your search bar, read aloud, and it reads it back to you. So what I do is I write it, and then I go to the read aloud, and then I listen to it. And oh my God, I found so many different things when I listen to it versus when I write it. And then later on I print it off and I look at it on paper. But when I'm doing the first phases, I write it and then edit it where I think it needs to be, and then I listen to it because I'll miss a word or a word sounds funny. Like I was writing this part yesterday where I said, I scooped up the sand. I'm in Jordan in Wadi Rum right now, in where I'm writing. I scooped up the sand, and then I opened my fingers, and the sand, something through my fingers, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, cascaded, no. I fell, no. And so I'm like trying to find the right word. I'm like, what's it doing? Like, I'm like, it's going through my face. There's no way I could watch TV and do that. I'm like, so I ended up with slip. I'm like, it slipped through my fingers. I'm like, okay, and then I listened to it back, because when I first said, okay, I scooped the sand, with the rich, whatever, fine sand. And then it's like cascading. I'm like, oh, that's a stupid word. So I don't know how people do that, because for me, words are very important. And like I said, because this story is so big in its magnitude in terms of where you go, I have to be very thoughtful. If I can find one word that replaces 3, I use it every time. So I'm very thoughtful with how to do that, to make sure that it's as, like I said, economical on words as I can, because they're already quite long.
Mm-hmm. That's
So no
true.
way could I watch TV. No way. I would be like, I wouldn't, it wouldn't even be worth it for me. I would be like, I'm just going to watch the show and I don't
Yeah, get distracted.
know. Yeah, exactly. No way. No way.
So these are questions about your characters and themes. So
Mhm.
who is your favorite character in the series and why?
I think in book four, there is a character in book four that I really like. Book four is a safari that I did in Africa for 6 weeks. So I rocked up to this safari that started in Nairobi and ended in Harare. And I didn't know anybody. There was 28 people on this like overland. It's kind of like a retrofitted Mack truck, and you do camping and all this stuff. And I was and you do your own cooking in these in these things. And I'm an okay cook, so that's okay. And you take turns, so everyone takes turns cooking and cooking for a day, and then the next day you're the dishwasher, and then you get cooked for. So I was put in this cook group with this English guy, and he was a police officer, and he was so funny, like dry sense of humor, and we would just get into so much trouble together. The sort of the things we got up to in terms of just sabotage and all that. So I really enjoyed the banter and the back and forth with him. And my sister-in-law had read uh, the real rough draft of book four, and she said that was her favorite character too, and ironically she said it reminded her of my brother. So I thought, oh, isn't that funny, he was kind of with me even though it didn't even occur to me until after that he was so much like my brother. So I'd probably say him, just in terms of just a really minor character, but somebody who was really fun.
Oh. So did any characters change significantly during the writing process?
In terms of from what they really were to what they did on paper, yeah, a few did. Not in terms of like what they said or what the impact that they were. I changed a lot of the appearances, and everybody's name has changed. The only names that are the same is obviously myself and my family, and then my close friends from home. Everybody else is changed, and I, one of the things that when you write memoir, I I I kind of felt like I had to draw a line for myself in terms of a lot of people told me stuff that that because when you're on the road and you're traveling and all those really long train rides, like an 8-hour train ride, you won't be disappointed that you've missed that in your life. But it's a really long time to sit there, and there wasn't, you weren't scrolling on your phone. You didn't really carry around books because they were so heavy. And so there was a lot of cards, and there was a lot of just, I spy, and just real stupid stuff. But you talk like, and you get really deep really quickly, and you sort of dunk yourself into this connection with someone, and they tell you stuff. And my thing was, okay, that's not for me to put in this memoir. For me to put in this memoir was only interactions with people that impacted me and changed me. So things that they said, things that happened, like in action, but I never kind of drew the line and said, I'm not putting people's personal information in here. It's not, they didn't sign up to that. Like it wasn't, or something that they told me or something that happened, that was my cut line. So did people change? No, I would say it's more that maybe what they look like. If they were particularly crazy, I would completely change what they look like and their name, but I didn't change the interaction.
Oh, okay, okay.
Mhm.
So how much of your personal experience influenced the characters or the storyline?
Well, not much because they were who they were. So in that case, when you're writing a memoir, it's more taking that, and I think where the difference was to be able to say, okay, this nugget of something happened, and then to be able to when what happens, right? So when you have an interaction with someone, you have the interaction and you're like, oh, feelings are sort of going through your heart and mind. And then if they really kind of drag out, then you'll kind of go, oh shit, I really didn't like that, or whatever. But when I write this, I have to then say, oh, well, this is how it impacts me. So it was more that, to be able to go in and to articulate that along the way of how it impacted me as things were happening.
Oh, nice. So for these questions, these are book specific questions. So they're about your books. I want to show the listeners your book. There it is.
Yes.
So what's the central message of Finding Color, and how does it set the tone for the series?
Yeah, Finding Color, you're dumped into me in a doctor's office because I'm so down in the dumps I can't even get through the day. And the doctor, I think it's a sign of the times too, because the doctor actually took the time to have the conversation with me, which I don't know if they would now. They would just write me a script and tell me to go on my way. But she took the time to identify that I had this large space in my life left over after my mom died, and I hadn't filled it. And she said, you need to fill this or else you're not going to be fulfilled. And that's where the book starts. And that's the sort of, okay, I'm on this quest to fill my life. And I try a bunch of stuff and nothing works. And that's when I say, okay, the only thing I really loved doing was backpacking and traveling. And I thought, okay, well, this is it. So I chuck in my job and I chuck in everything and I just get on a plane and go to London. And that's where this starts. So the real thing about Finding Color is just that it's more of a, okay, what do I like? Understanding, learning myself, and understanding that I thought after my mom died that it was just, it was never going to come back. I was never going to be happy again. But that's what this book does. It realizes that I've had it there, and that's what book one is about.
So why did you choose Finding Color as the title for the first book?
Because when I started the journey, it was just like everything was beige. Like it wasn't, when they say, oh, it's all gray, it wasn't gray for me. It was beige. I had a beige sweater. Beige was my go-to color of choice. I mean, beige, like it was just, and it was just, everything was beige. Nothing lacked, everything lacked color. And through the book, I start to find it again. And it's just, everything becomes this real bright world. And that's what it was to me. It was Finding Color.
Aww, that's cute. So in Life Strike Back, what does Life Strike Back expand on the fountain laid in the first book?
So Finding Color was really the first step in the trip. It was saying, okay, I'm doing this, I'm going out, I'm going to do it. And then Life Strikes Back is, I don't know. Are you a Star Wars fan at all?
Yes.
Okay. So, second Star Wars. Well, when I grew up, second Star Wars. Now it's 5. Empire Strikes Back, right? So, Empire Strikes Back. It's tragic, right? It's like when Han Solo's frozen in carbonite, and like all the things that they face. But what made that movie so good was that everybody was, it was the quips, it was the friendships, it was the way they supported each other. It wasn't like a super sad movie, even though it was heavy, right? And that's what book 2 is about. Book 2 deals with grief, and it deals with, there's a lot of other personal things happen in terms of being a woman and traveling and what you have to deal with in that sense. And that's all there on the pages too. So it was really that it was Life Strikes Back because it did. Like that was hard. It was hard traveling in those countries. There wasn't many people there, but the the quips. I travel. I have a travel partner that I'm with, and we just get along so well. And it's funny, and we laugh all the time, and funny things happen. So there's that beautiful balance between the real, the slog of the trip versus the sort of fun that we made it. So, and that's the second one, Life Strikes Back, and that really deals with grief too.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Man. So can you describe one key moment in this book that changed the trajectory of the series?
In book two,
Yes, and Life Strikes Back.
uh, I think I think just the realization that I had always kind of said I was going to do this trip alone. Like if I couldn't find anybody to do it with, I would do it by myself.
Mhm.
But what was the real kicker was that I it was the people that I remembered more than the places. And it was the experiences and the funny things I had. And it wasn't so much traveling to all these beautiful places. And that was wonderful. It was the journey and the people who I did it with that made the most lasting impact.
Oh wow. So was the food different there? Like, is it different from American food?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all have bananas and we all have bread and we all have peppers and cheese, so generally you can formulate yourself a peanut butter sandwich when required. Um, but yeah, I think it was more the language barrier. We didn't kind of
Oh.
know what we were getting into. So we would do like fish and trying to sort of we were like moo, like trying to like explain to someone like what we were going to have. And you know when we were in Russia, the alphabet's completely different, so it was a bit of a wash. So what we did was we would eat at places that were busy, and we would casually kind of walk around and say, okay, I like that. And then we would say, like, we would go and point to the one that we wanted. So
Oh.
that was usually our strategy, was just to eat at busy places and look around and say, we'll have that. So
Oh. That's actually
yeah,
really smart. Like,
it was pretty good. And when in doubt, a slice of pizza is, you can't go wrong with a slice of pizza. So
that's true.
yeah. So, and then we would make a lot of sandwiches as well. So you go into the shops, and sometimes, like in Russia, for example, when we were there, all the shops were like jewelry stores, like all the food was behind. So you had to point at like a loaf of bread, and then a lady would sort of write a little chit for you, and you go and pay for it, and then she'd give you the loaf of bread. So you were hoping that she got what you pointed at. So there's a lot like that American Express commercial where the girl's like doing the miming and saying she got robbed. Like that was every day. So yeah, we just kind of came up with a few strategies in terms of how to. Oh, and also things like spaghetti.
Uh-huh.
Once we got into the same alphabet again, spaghetti you can usually figure out on a menu, and omelet is odd enough that you can usually figure it out. So we would
Oh.
always opt for an omelet or spaghetti and hope that what was in it was something we didn't hate. Yeah.
So this is a question for Hello, I'm Here.
Mhm.
What's the significance of the title Hello, I'm Here?
Hello, I'm Here is when you get to Egypt. Well, actually, all through the Middle East. So more than half of the book takes place in the Middle East, and the locals are quite keen to chat with any foreign girl and
Oh.
or foreigner, and they kind of walk in packs of 5 or 6, and they kind of follow you. And then I think they have like a block, and then as you transfer to the next block, a different group of 5 or 6 kind of follow you, and they're constantly trying to get your attention. So there's a lot of different ones, but one of my favorites was "Hello, I'm here." Like they would always try to get your attention. So
Mhm.
that was definitely my favorite, and definitely the kindest thing that was said as we would walk along the streets. So it worked out good because that was in terms, it had like a double entendre in terms of using that expression that we heard a lot. And then also at the end of it, I felt like I was really present in the trip. Before that, I was kind of going through the motions, but I was present. And that's what "Hello, I'm Here" is like. Okay, I'm here too. So
Oh, okay. So how does
mhm.
this book deepen readers' understandings of their characters and their journeys?
This one is is more about emptiness. So overcoming challenges. I've broken this one into three parts. There's three distinct parts, and there's a lot of again challenges. Most of it's interesting when you look at it from a book structure. The antagonist, a lot of times the antagonist is the environment rather than a person. But actually, in this one is the first time there's an actual antagonist in terms of a person. So there's a lot of overcoming that. And also, my eyes started to get opened because, again, I talked about the naivete in terms of the first book, and I had a lot of feedback about that. And I don't blame people because, yeah, it was. And it's more of a personal growth and the recognition of, okay, wow, I'm pretty lucky where I came from, and this is really opening your eyes when you get to a place like that, and you see different things. So that's what's happening there. Mm-hmm.
Nice. So in Beautifully Warped, how does the Beautifully Warped challenge the characters or the readers?
So Beautifully Warped was the first time that I was truly on my own, because I'd said, oh, I'm going to do this on my own. And I was all like, snap it. Like, I just said, no, I didn't. I was very lucky. I was with people most of the time. And Beautifully Warped, I get on a plane from Cairo and I end up in Nairobi, and I get off the plane in Nairobi, and I do stay with a family for a little bit through a friend of a friend, you'll get to that. But I do this safari and I don't know anybody, and I kind of rock up and everybody's all kind of palsies with folks. And it's this adventure of like, it's crazy. Like, the environment is crazy. Africa, oh my God, I fell in love with Africa so hard. I didn't want to leave. It is by far the most magical, amazing place. It still sits it sits inside me in terms of just how beautiful, and that just, there's a feeling like no other. And my goal is to bring readers along in terms of all of the challenges that happen being with such a small space with so many people from all over the world who are all different, and existing. It would be like a perfect sort of experiment for someone to go on and see what it's like to sort of just meld these different characters in, like, sort of this really small environment, and but then bringing you along on this beautiful journey of discovery. And as myself too, I changed completely in that book. That time, it was only 6 weeks, but I've just never been the same since, in a good way.
Wow. So how long did you stay in each place? Like, did you stay for a month or a week or?
Yeah. So, for example, the Middle East was 2 months. So there was 2 months in the Middle East, and then Africa. I was there for a week in Nairobi before I did the 6-week safari, and then I went. Book 5 is another. South Africa, Namibia, and Australia. So all in all, the whole sort of round the world trip was from when I left London to Russia. It was about 11 months. So, but then I was in London for 6 months. It was a while. Yeah.
Oh wow, that sounds like a really nice time. I want to do that. You're giving me like
Yeah.
hope to travel.
You should. Well, when you read my book, you see it doesn't take much. You have to give up. You give up a lot though, but it doesn't take as much as you think to be able to do this. But you do have to give up. Like, I lived basically in a backpack, and that was my whole world, the backpack. So,
Oh man, I want to do it.
yeah.
So about your last book, Landing Place, how did you
Mhm.
approach wrapping up the series in Landing Place?
Landing Place was tricky because there's still quite a bit of traveling in it. And then when, like I told you, I fell in love with Africa, and Africa was a complete surprise. To be honest, Africa was a sedition. I really wanted to go to Asia my whole life. I wanted to go to Nepal. I wanted to climb in the Annapurna circuit there. I was so desperate to go, and I met this guy, and we broke up, and he was going there, and I thought, you know what? I'm so angry at him. I do not even want to be on the same continent. So that's when I decided to go to Africa instead, which, okay, you know, happy accident. I think these things are interesting. And it was the best decision ever, like going to Africa. So in book 5, I'm still in Africa, and just still making my way through. And I get to Australia, which was also a real important part of the trip in terms of where I wanted to go. And it was just, it sounds so horrible, but it was a letdown after Africa. I didn't, you know, some things surprise you when you don't have any expectations for something, and you just sort of jump into an adventure and you get completely surprised and completely overwhelmed by how amazing it is. And then something you've hyped in your mind, and then you show up and you're thinking, oh, this is really nice. Like, I'm not going to lie, like, Sydney's beautiful, but it's not, you know, Serengeti, or it's not, you know, Cape Town. And so, so wrapping up the series was really at the end in terms of how I ended the journey and why. That's really the end of it, is just wrapping that all up, and then sort of making sure that the reader has enough information that they're satisfied with. Okay, I've been through 5 of these now, like, you need to close this off for me properly. So being sure that I've got enough information in there so that the reader's like, okay, I feel like I'm adequately closed, if you will.
Nice. So are you satisfied with how you ended the series? Are you satisfied with it?
I haven't completely. I still, like, that's still running in the back of my mind. How it's written right now, no, I need to put more in. So I'm going to need to sort of spend a little more time when I get to that one and make sure that it closes it off adequately. I still need to put more into that just now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I can't wait to read these books. It's definitely going to be with me when I start traveling with my dog.
Good. You should. Actually, in book 2, I met in Prague. I met a guy who was traveling with his seeing eye dog, and he was completely blind, and he'd been traveling the world for 2 years with his dog. I'm like, all these questions are still like brewing. I just thought, how, like, dog food, like, how do you tell the bunny?
Yes.
Like, how do you not, like, it was the most crazy thing. Anyways, he was one of my favorite people I met, only just for such a short time. I was so impressed. So
man, yeah, because it's like having a kid travel along with you.
Yeah, I bet. I know.
So my last and final question before I let you go: what advice would you give inspiring authors looking to write their own book series?
I think do it. I would absolutely do it. And I think don't and get as far as you can on your own, and then get some help, because I thought, oh, written a book, yay! And that was years ago, and it took so long to get it to a point where it was. I didn't want to put out a piece of crap. I thought, I've got 5 of these. The first one's a piece of crap. It doesn't really make much sense. So I spent a lot of time learning how to do it. I didn't want to grow as I grew with the books. I wanted to be, you know, as competent as I could be on the first one. So I probably was a little bit more specific about it than other folks. But my advice would be, write it, get it as good as you can, spend your time interviewing whoever to get the help that you need to be able to get it to improve on your book, because it's such a independent work that it's nice to be able to get the opinions. Don't go to everybody, but get some targeted support when you can, and then just do it. It's not actually as hard as you think. So
definitely, it's really great advice. I want to thank you so much, Candace, for being a guest on my podcast today and chatting with me.
Thank you. It's been super fun. Thanks, Brooke.
You have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Hey everyone, I want to thank you all so much for supporting She Blurs podcast and for listening to my interview with Candace. If you would like to purchase any of her books, it's Candace. Let me make sure I got her website. Oh, Candace McPie. I think I'm pronouncing it right. .com, and you can purchase her books through there. And thank you all so much for listening. I hope to see you next time for the next interview. Bye.